Okay, we'll go into the next verses here. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as the dragon, and exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, the second beast come out of the earth. I went through the Greek on this, and here's a more literal translation. And I perceived another beast quickly growing like a plant out of the land. Okay, so it's this beast he perceived is like a plant that grows very rapidly out of the earth itself. And there's several layers to interpretation of this. Like I say, with every spiritual writing, there's at least three interpretations that correspond and would apply. And the interesting one on this is the beast coming out of the earth with two horns and like a lamb. And who is the Lamb of God?
That would be Jesus.
All right, that would be the Christ.
Yeah.
So this second beast coming out of the earth had the appearance of when it first come out. It had two horns like a lamb, but then he spake as what?
Oh, a lion?
The dragon,
The
okay?
dragon. Okay.
The dark side. So he had two horns that symbolized the side of light and truth, yet he wound up speaking the words of the dragon. And then he wound up exercising all the power of the first beast before him and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship this first beast. I submit that this second beast on the physical level interpretation is the United States. The United States just sprouted up on the earth like a quickly growing plant, just as described here. And it had two horns that represented the Christ. What are those two horns? Two horns represent power, the power of a kingdom, the power of a thought form, the power to produce a great work of some kind. So they had two horns that represented the Christ. What were these two horns, do you think? When the United States started growing and becoming a significant nation, what were the two aspects of it that represented the Christ?
One
Well,
of
the
them is
Constitution for one.
Constitution.
The Constitution.
Well, a constitution based on principles. And then I would say the other one would be freedom.
Well, it's all tied together. The Constitution is a guarantee, and Bill of Rights are a guarantee.
The Bill of Rights was probably
even more important
part of the Constitution.
Yeah,
ensuring the rights of the individual.
So the Spirit of Christ represents the spirit of freedom, and freedom, the freedom of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, the establishment of free speech and everything. These were. This was one of the horns that represented the Christ, because without a degree of freedom, the principles that are taught by Christ could never be permeate society. Now look at places where there isn't much freedom, like North Korea. Even Bibles are banned there. You can't have any free thought in the direction of spiritual progression. The poor people there are, I think North Korea is a particular hell reserved for people to reincarnate into that have a lot of karma to pay off. But can you think, you know, being born in some place like North Korea is just about is a pretty powerful version of hell. You know, you have to pretend all the time that you're happy with the dear leader. If you attend one of his speeches, you got to have a big grin on your face, or else he'll come interrogate you and find out why you weren't grinning and looking happy. And
if you don't shed genuine tears when he passes by in a parade, you're put to death.
really, well,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do that.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either.
That's an authentic situation that they go through, and that's why you always see that they show several examples that when they talk about their leader, they're crying, and they better, or they're not going to have the ability to cry anymore.
Wow, I haven't heard that one. That's even worse than I thought. I know that they go through pictures of people in a crowd when their dear leader is speaking, and if any of them are not looking happy, they interrogate them and find out what their problem is. And
You can't play on your cell phone.
Yeah.
And there's different degrees to that hell that you're talking about, JJ, because I came across a YouTube video of a young woman from China who had her and her mother made it to the United States, and she was delivering a speech to a group of college kids who were about her same age, but it was a woke community of college kids, and I mean, she put it to them. She was so gentle and kind and loving in her presentation, but she was saying, you have no idea, okay? Because where she came from, they were only allowed to have one child, and so if the families have a daughter, then they'll hide that baby because they want to have a son to further on their name. So all these women are born and they don't have identities with, like social security numbers and official birth records and stuff like that, because they hide them so that they can have a son. And then in the process, a lot of them get put into sex slaves because they can't be protected by the system and so forth. And so she was one of these sex slaves. And anyway, she finally escaped that, and she came here and she's talking to all these, and she goes, here's what I'm grateful for. And just the pure basic things of living and breathing is what she was being grateful for. And she said it in such a way that the whole audience had nothing to say. They were completely silent. And they, they were trying to comprehend what she was even, it was just so powerful. Anyway.
Yeah, it's really sad how little each passing generation seems to appreciate the freedom we have less, and think that they see that other people have freedom to say stuff they don't like. So they think freedom should be limited for those guys, not for them. But once you limit freedom for the other guy, you wind up eventually limiting freedom for yourself. And so this downward spiral of freedom needs to be reversed. And we need to be reminded by people like that how important our freedoms is.
Well, what's ironic about it is the religions were based on principles of freedom, but now members of organized religions are less and less and less free. They have to kowtow to the philosophies of current leaders, which are very restricting.
Yeah,
they're losing a lot of freedom. They don't even know. They're like the frog put into the pot that turn up the heat, and they don't even know that they're going to be boiled alive.
Yeah.
Poor people.
Okay, so the one horn represents the basic break off from the world where we established that government is to serve us. We are not to serve the government. In other words, we are not servants of some king, but that which governs us is supposed to be a servant to us. That's the way it started, okay? But that's not the way it's finishing, unfortunately. The second horn, what is the second horn that is like a lamb, that represents the Christ energy?
Religion?
Yeah, it's not so much religion, but spiritual endeavors. Because of freedom in the United States at its founding, there's all kinds of religious thought sprouting up here because of freedom of thought, all kinds of religious and spiritual ideas that move the consciousness of Christ forward in the minds of people. Sprouted up here in the United States, and there's it's just not one religion or philosophy, but quite a few of them manifested, and the different movements kind of taught a different aspect of the Christ consciousness. And some of these are, here's just a handful of them. The Mormons presented an entirely different view of things, like revelation from God is still available. That was a big thing with them. Christian Science presented the idea that our thoughts are very powerful and they can heal. The Unity Church presented a lot of new spiritual concepts that made people think about how to get what they want in life. Theosophy and Alice A. Bailey and the I Am movements and breakoffs, all of them presented a tremendous amount of spiritual teachings and principles that can move the work of Christ forward. So the second horn of this beast that rose up out of the earth represents all these innovative spiritual thinking. Think of how much spiritual innovation has occurred in the United States compared with other parts of the world. I mean, all these things that sprouted up here wound up being adapted by many other parts of the world and spreading around. So this, I submit, is the second horn. So what happened? Let's go through this again. So this beast come up out of the earth having two horns representing the Christ, two powers representing the Christ. But then he spake as the dragon. How could that happen? How could that happen? That let's go into the first horn. The first horn is the political. We started out with greater freedoms, making the government our servant. Did that get turned around? Is the government still our servant?
They corrupted. They began to corrupt everything.
Is it turning around to where we're the servants of the government?
We're not even servants, we're slaves.
Oh. So it's turned around. And how did this happen? We have our elected representatives, they're supposed to represent us. But then what's happened is they've turned their power over to bureaucracies. I just read an article about this is one of the things that some people in Congress are trying to counter, is that there's thousands, literally thousands and thousands of regulations put in place by the many bureaucracies that are as solid as laws made by Congress. And these bureaucracies, these people are unelected, and the regulations by all these bureaucracies are meant to for us to serve rather than be agents of servants to us. And so what happens is the bureaucracies then get all this power, and they in turn tend to influence the elected Congress. For instance, what's often called the deep state, everybody in the deep state is unelected, yet a lot of these guys have a lot of power over our elected representatives. So our elected representatives wind up not representing the will of the people, but the will of the bureaucracies and the people
Bureaucrats.
in charge that are not even elected. And so this turns the horn that is like a lamb to speak as the dragon. So we still have the appearance of a free society, but when the actual implementation comes, it's speaking as the dragon. You know, you must obey or else you are going to suffer. And that's the words of the dragon. Okay. Now, the same things with religions. All these religions started out, you know, as benevolent organizations with really all of them had some really good ideas. And there was a lot of freedom of thought when all these movements started, but they all drift away toward having a structure, having thought forms that if you violate them, then you are seen as a renegade, you're seen as a nonconformist, and they all want you to comply. And this has happened with all the movements. And each one of these movements don't accept the other movements and can't see the good in them. Mormons, for instance, can't see much good in Theosophy and Alice A. Bailey or Christian Science. Christian Science can't see much to embrace in the others. And even Theosophy and people who follow Alice A. Bailey, they're just pretty much into them very strongly. And if you don't go according to the literal interpretation, and you're discounted. A Course in Miracles people, same way. They just go by that book pretty much, and they don't look at the benefits of the other philosophies out there, and so they drift away from that flexibility and freedom that's in the Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness is very inclusive. And all these spiritual movements go to more exclusiveness rather than inclusiveness, even though many of them claim to be inclusive. And so on. Like, look at the two political parties we have. Both of them claim to be inclusive, but both of them pretty much, a lot of them don't want to be even friends with half of the people of the country that are in the other party.
And if you listen to them, they can say a statement of where they're claiming to be inclusive, and in the next sentence, it proves that they're not, and they don't even hear themselves saying it.
Yeah. If you're a Democrat or Republican and you reject the other party, you're actually excluding half of the people in the whole country, even though you include oddball people within your own party. That's not enough. You have to see the Christ in everybody, not just people that believe exactly the way you do. And religions are this way too. You know, people involved in a spiritual movement, they don't see the Christ in the people that's out of the movement. And so these two horns both
Hey, JJ,
have drifted away. Yeah.
if I can add something here, uh, and there's things that we may not be aware of and understand that are at play also that go right along with this that support what you're talking about. But I remember reading this article, and it's a beautiful article, and I went back and tried to find it. I couldn't find it. But this psychologist drew the analogy he drew the commonalities between professional wrestling and its rise in popularity over the last 20 years to religion. And he explained that they're both for a majority of the people in religion, it's the same thing as watching wrestling for them, and knowing that the professional wrestling is an entertainment, it's sports entertainment, it's not real, and but it's a form of escapism, and the majority of the people who watch professional wrestling, they don't want to hear people say that it's fake. They know it's fake, but they won't listen to anyone who says it's fake because they're in a fantasy about it. And the fantasy is good, and it's a form of escapism. And he drew the parallels that the majority of the people in different religions are in the same trap. It's they don't have any basis for believing what that religion is saying is true, but it is their form of escapism to convince themselves that to get out of the messy world and think about all the problems of the world and in their life, and go in here into this fantasy and say, well, everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And it's their form of escapism. And his thing was that's why we've had 40 million people leave their religion since 1990. They're just getting tired of. It's the equivalent of getting tired of watching fake wrestling for them.
Yeah.
I thought it was an excellent article.
Interesting correspondence. Okay, so let's examine how the United States has two horns like a lamb but speaks as the dragon. And it says that he causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, the deadly wound was healed. The foundation of the United States caused a deadly wound to the beast, the authority systems of the earth, because of the freedom that it espoused. But then the bureaucracies came in, were created, and they began to take more control than the elected officials, and even controlling the elected officials. So the deadly wound began to be healed, but we still have these two horns like a lamb, at least in theory, that we're supposed to have in practice. We're supposed to have freedom of speech and the Bill of Rights and all this. But what this second beast did, it caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. And it's interesting how this happened. As you look at all of the nations and movements that represent the beast of strong authority that controls the people, look at where they rose up, and you will find they were created with the support of the people of the United States. Let's look at communism, for instance. People just think the Soviet Russia, the Soviet Empire just rose up just on its own. No, they were financed in part by many financial organizations here in the United States, supported them. And a lot of these people that financed the rise of the Soviet Empire did it with the idea that they could have really cheap labor, because everybody there would be pretty much slaves that would work for pennies. And so it was done with the idea of creating an empire that was really usable for the powerful people here in the United States, and it kind of backfired on them. And then let's look at the rise of Hitler and Germany. They were financed largely by powerful people here in the United States. Many businesses, many large businesses financed Germany and endeavors that was endorsed by Hitler. And without them, Hitler would not have been able to have the rise to power that he had. And let's look at China. Nixon visited China, and they were in no way in competition to us. There was no way that they could be a great military threat to us because they were pretty much impoverished. And we began to interplay with them and support them and move manufacturing over there. And this caused them and their rigid authoritative system to gain, that was represented the beast, to gain tremendous power. And even in North Korea, we send them technology and food. And one of the most outrageous things about North Korea was we told them in the 90s that, we don't want you to develop atomic weapons, so here's what we'll do. We'll help you develop safe nuclear energy so you can have nuclear power for your country if you promise to behave yourselves and not develop atomic bombs. And yeah, what did they say? They said, sure, we'll behave ourselves. So
wasn't that Clinton that did that?
Yeah, during the Clinton administration. And so they shared with them nuclear technology. And they also shared with China technology of how to guide missiles to their targets, and for some odd reason. And that gave China the ability to develop a nuclear strike force. And so we have supported all these things. And Saddam Hussein, same thing. We supported him and give him a lot of financial support. And in the Middle East, where there's all kinds of problems, we buy enough oil from them so that they got plenty of money to create all kinds of disturbance wherever they want. And so we create an image of the beast all around the world. And then what happens? It becomes a threat to us, like Saddam Hussein become a threat. So we create him, and then we have to destroy him. We created Hitler, and then we had to destroy him. We created the Soviet Empire, and then we didn't directly destroy it, but we undermined him financially, so it fell apart. So the United States keeps supporting the beast, and then it winds up backfiring on us, and we have to fight that which we created. So it's interesting reading this over. You can really see how it fits in. So let's read it over again. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, the United States. He had two horns like a lamb. The freedoms of the Constitution and the spiritual organizations. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And we've supported these countries all around the earth that are controlled by the beast. And we have caused many of the peoples of the earth to worship this first beast. Okay. So that's pretty interesting.
Hey, JJ.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the back row of that. John's book of Revelation is the blueprint of how a disciple advances. So how does this particular part scale down to the individual disciple?
Okay, that's another interpretation. This is the physical interpretation. The spiritual interpretation is the beast represents the lower nature. Okay, and when the person becomes a disciple, he has two horns like a lamb, which are the words and the works of Christ, or the God within. Okay, and then as he progresses along, he begins to create a significant work. And then after the work is created, then it has the same problem, and it still has these two horns. Like, let's take Christianity for example. It still represents the words and works of Christ. They're still there. You can read them in the Bible, and you can see people preaching them, but they're speaking the words of the dragon, because they're saying, we have a leader or a prophet or a guru who represents God. You need to listen to him and obey, or you're going to go to hell. Okay, so those are the words of the dragon. And so we have the same thing occurring with any work that is started by a true disciple that represents the words and the works, the two horns of that represent the Christ. So that's kind of interesting to contemplate also. So good question there, Scott. Now,
but then you said the first step for the disciple is living by the words and works of Christ, but that comes down to interpretation and your inability to interpret if you don't have soul contact. Because a lot of people are lost because they think they're following the works and words of Christ, and they're lost in their individual religions.
Yeah, but when a person becomes a disciple, he does recognize the truth.
Oh, this is after that. Okay, I see.
Yeah. Before that, he's not in that category yet. But once he gets in that category, he recognizes he teaches words and works that are inspired, starts an inspired organization, and then eventually the dragon takes over, and it still has the two horns, like Christianity started by the Christ, still has the two horns. The words and the works are still there, but the control is by the dragon, and the various religions tell you that you need to go by what we say. Don't go by what you think after you read the scriptures and get confirmation from your soul. Don't do that. Do what our leaders and teachers tell you to do, and those are the words of the dragon. Okay, so the two horns are still there in Christianity. We have the words of Christ in the scriptures, and very inspired words there, and we have the works of the early saints for us as an example, but they are, instead of going by them, it's taken over by the dragon, and they are pretty much suffocated in the various religions. Okay, any more comment on that?
What I'm seeing, I apologize there, Curtis. What I'm seeing is the overall principle that the Dark Brothers do with the dragon, the analogy, is stop evolution, and the progress of man's of humanity's spiritual progression is based on evolution. And evolution is another word for trial and error, and trial and error is another word for cause and effect. But the evolution, in order for evolution to take place, you have to be able to think. And so when these things start, like a religion, you said they start with beneficent intentions. The dragon takes over and reverses that so that it becomes a stuck point. The flow of the energy of evolution stops if people have stopped thinking, and it can't progress any. Just like with the example you gave before you started with Michio Ikaku, whatever, with the pictures of the space.
Yeah.
He was willing to entertain different possibilities based on what they were looking at with those pictures, and his fellow scientists were saying, no, we have to take these pictures and fit them into the belief system that we have and make it work that way, because we can't be looking at something different or new. But he was willing to entertain that it might be something very different than what they understood. And if you don't have that, then you stop the flow of the evolutionary energy. And that's what every religion has done. And that's what science does repeatedly in different areas. And I think that's what the dragon does. I think the dragon is there and represents the stoppage of the evolutionary energy.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of being here, is to evolve spiritually. And where the Spirit of Christ is free, there is strong evolution. Where it is suffocated, then evolution comes to a halt. Okay.
I was going to say something. In this great invocation, we're going through it in our class, and the Tibetan says there are a lot of energies that are on the side of light, from the Lords of Liberation, members of the hierarchy, the conclave, the riders from the secret place, that are willing to lend their aid and enlightenment and support to those that, he says, humanity must stand with massed intent. So he's saying that for the kingdom of God to roll forth like a stone cut out of a mountain without hands, he says certain members of humanity, certain groups, have to align. Doesn't matter what political faction you're a part of, but we have to stand with massed intent, or a strong intention of spreading the light. And that's what he's talking about, to overcome the mark of the beast.
Yeah. Okay.
Stand with massed intent.
Good points. We'll cover one more verse here. Now, he, meaning this second beast, or the United States, doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire to come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. How did the United States make fire come down from earth, from heaven, in the sight of men, that people of the earth could actually see the fire brought down?
Oh, the atomic bomb?
Exactly right. Now, the interesting thing about the Greek word for heaven, which is Uranos, is it's the same word, Uranos. Do you know what element came from that Greek word?
What, uranium?
Uranium. Yeah, uranium is derived from that same word as heaven. Okay, so let's read it this way. And he, the United States, maketh fire to come down out of uranium on earth in the sight of men. How did that happen?
Hiroshima.
Nagasaki.
Right. Yeah, the first one was Hiroshima. We tested it in New Mexico first, but nobody knew about it. But then the first explosion that anybody knew about was Hiroshima. And was that available for the sight of men to witness?
Hiroshima.
Right.
Yeah.
We saw that. So fire came down out of uranium on Earth in the sight of man. This was a great wonder.
Out of heaven, out of uranium.
Out of uranium. And uranium comes from the same Greek word as heaven.
Now, weren't the two atomic bombs, one was fission, one was fusion, if I recall. One was the splitting of the atom, and then one was made from radioactive material, like uranium.
I think they were a little different, but I don't think the second one was actually fusion. Yeah, the fusion came later, if I remember right.
Yeah, but there were some differences between.
There were some differences between the two bombs. I can't remember exactly. I think they used a different material. I think one used plutonium and the other used uranium-235 or something.
We were talking about the subtleties of the molecular world in a previous meeting, and how these energies actually impact the personality. And it's interesting that while the in is it Matthew where it says the world mourned after the atomic bomb,
Yeah.
but DK in externalization of the hierarchy is almost giddy when that happened, because it released certain energies that were unknown to humanity, that this was going on. But it released certain energies at the molecular level that was an important step for humanity to grow and progress. And so it's very interesting that this horrible weapon that killed tens of thousands or whatever it was, yet the hierarchy saw this as a great thing, that it was a needed step, that it had subtle energies working on these subtle planes that
he said this was an actual initiation for matter itself, which is kind of interesting statement.
Well, not only that, Japan never would have surrendered, and we would have lost tens of thousands in combat overcoming Japan if we had to go with conventional weaponry.
Yeah, he also said it was a saving force. It's people don't really look on it that way, but because it's such an overpowering thing, everybody's afraid to use it. So we're afraid to go to too much of an actual war like we did in World War II, because if we did, it would about destroy the planet. But there's always a possibility that somebody will be crazy enough to do it. So let's hope it stays as a saving force. I think without the atomic bomb, we would have been in an actual hot war with the Soviet Empire. But we were both afraid to use the bomb. So
that was a Cold War. No one moved.
Cold wars are a lot less harmful than a hot war, that's for sure.
These are some of his words, just quickly. He says, "I would like at this time to touch upon the greatest spiritual event which has taken place since the fourth kingdom of nature, the human kingdom, appeared. I refer to the release of atomic energy as related in the newspapers this week, August 6, 1945, in connection with the bombing of Japan. Greatest spiritual event."
Yeah, that's quite the statement. That runs really contrary to even what a lot of Alice A. Bailey acolytes think.
Yeah,
that's in externalization.
Yeah, it's in the latter chapters, page 523. This is on a Word document, but I can post that somewhere. He says more about it and what that actual you
Yeah,
know,
he says
more about.
atomic energy will eventually be used to bring tremendous freedom and supply the needs of the whole world with the power it can release if used productively. But since
Imagine driving your car, having a car that uses a atomic power cell that big with no pollution, that just runs and runs. They're doing that already with aircraft carriers, running them on atomic energy. They run forever.
well, the Voyager spacecraft, they sent two of them off in the 1970s, and they're powered with nuclear energy, and they're still going.
France is powered 75% with nuclear energy without any negative impact.
But then the dark side surfaced and attacked nuclear energy, and we had a setback that cost us 20 or 30 years in progress because
of evolution.
Chernobyl.
people were so afraid of it.
Is they came in and stopped the evolutionary process of that. That's what they did.
Yeah, set us back 20 or 30 years.
Hey, so in listening to Adam, the thought that popped in my mind was for that to take place, the astrological alignment of everything probably had to be at certain points. And so now I'm wondering if the people born on the day that the atomic bombs were released, if they designed their life to be born on that day for specific spiritual reasons, because that was such a great event.
Yeah, well,
it might be
know.
Might be something with that. What was that August 6th date what was that referring to? Was that the date of the newspaper?
That's the day the first bomb was dropped.
That's pretty close to your birthday, Curtis. You're kind of like a atomic bomb.
I'd have said let her drop.
Yeah.
Those
we
bombs
didn't have much choice at that point.
Those bombs were dropped in August
6th, and August 1 was dropped 2 or 3 days later.
Yeah.
For some reason I thought, okay, I got it mixed up with D-Day.
Yeah.
All right.
August 6th and 9th or 10th. Anyway, around then.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. We'll start talking about a continuation of this idea with the sign of the Son of Man is the next great event in this process. Okay, my friends, let's